Tonight, I am going to continue talking about the Practice of Lojong by Trungpa Rinpoche. I'm starting with slogan 38, which is don't seek others' pain as a means to happiness. This is the last of the section that is about commitments to Lojong practice. That is the last section 6. And these are various commitments that we take when we practice Lojong. And this one here is, the commitment is that we shouldn't seek happiness in other people. We shouldn't seek other people's pain as a means of us being happy. And even beyond that, we shouldn't look for happiness as coming from outside of ourselves. It really comes from within, and that we can be happy when other people are happy too and rejoice in their happiness and their good fortune. So to begin with here, that seeking happiness at someone else's expense, Trungpa Rinpoche feels is a very common human trait. And this is according to the Lojong commentaries. We all want happiness, but we tend to look for it in the wrong places. And in doing so, we accumulate negative karma, and as a result, we experience suffering and problems and difficulties and sorrows. So this slogan, it focuses on this era of thinking other people's misfortunes could somehow bring us joy. And he has 5 ways that he talks about can be interpreted or can be seen. The first is someone we know is suffering, but instead of feeling sympathy for that person and their situation, we derive a certain amount of pleasure in it and maybe even gossip about it to other people. Another interpretation, or another, you might say, nuance of this is some people think that life is terrible, and that if someone else is experiencing even worse problems in their life, then that makes them feel better. They feel a certain gratification rather than concern for the other person. The third way is that we wish harm to come on people that we dislike. We think, may this person that we would consider a troublemaker in some way or another, we wish harm or ill will to that person. A fourth way is that this tends to be an attitude among what he called privileged people with money, with resources, education, and so forth. And they tend to look down on those below them with disdain and so forth. So there's an element of arrogance here. And then the fifth one is human beings, he says, and he talks about human beings a lot in the slogans to come too, that we have this tendency for malicious gossip about people's misfortune and taking delight in that. And all you have to do is be in the checkout line in the grocery store, and there on the side as you're waiting are all these magazines, and they will be having cover stories about sad situation that some celebrity is in today, complete with pictures. And you can find the same thing on the internet. There are a lot of stories about how people that were rich and famous or beautiful and celebrities and so forth have come to sad situations. So the bottom line is that finding pleasure in the suffering of others is just plain non-virtuous and is contrary to the Lojong spirit. It really increases our own dissatisfaction, our own frustration, and our own disappointment in the long run. It's really very difficult to maintain a positive, cheerful, happy state of mind when you're thinking about the suffering of other people and thinking somehow or another this will make you feel better. Basically, it comes from deluded thinking, comes from egotistical thinking. The remedy, of course, is to seek happiness for its own sake and to make an effort, a concerted effort to overcome ill will, spite, victimousness. Be aware of these things and don't fall into the trap of going that direction. So happiness comes from a warm heart, and he says a wholehearted commitment to realizing the awakened heart. We need to be aware, be mindful of our own responses whenever we hear of somebody else's misfortune. That's actually a very good time to do a check on how am I reacting to this before you even say anything. Just how is this making me feel? When we develop compassion towards others, this will automatically generate happiness for ourselves. And this is really having a warm heart means. The way to seek happiness is to seek it in the joy and happiness of other people and rejoicing in that. He ends this commentary here by a quote by Sanjay Gompa. Rejoice when sentient beings are happy. He who is joyous when happy is called warm-hearted. You should behave in that manner. Then he ends this section with the conclusions about this sixth point in Lojong. So it's about being on guard, being mindful of these common human faults that we all have. They are unhelpful, at least unhelpful, and can be very, very negative in their influence in our lives. They're contrary to our spiritual practice and even happiness in our everyday lives. If we let them slip by, our mind training practices will be polluted, it will be twisted, and we will really fail to derive any significant benefit from mind training. So we have to guard against these, and this is why these are called commitments. It's just all too easy to fall into these types of behavior. And once you fall into them, it's easy for them to increase and increase and increase. And instead of going up or even maintaining, you just go down. So things like gossip are non-virtuous. Mindfulness and awareness of our thoughts, our speech, our motivation, our actions are necessary to eliminate these types of behavior and undermine our spiritual practice, our personal spiritual practice. It's important to put an end to these negative tendencies and to develop this warm heart, as I said. He talks so much about the Kadampa tradition and the Kadampa spirit, and he will do that in the next section as well. But here he says that kind-heartedness is a central part of the Kadampa tradition. He finishes this conclusion with a quote. Atisha always placed a unique emphasis on the importance of a kind heart. And rather than ask people, how are you? He would say, has your heart been kind? So that finishes the sixth point. I thought maybe this would be good to kind of review the commitments of this point here, this section. So let me go back here. Don't think about the affairs of others is one of the commitments here of this section. Don't talk about the weak points of others. change your attitude, but remain natural. In other words, the commitment is to change internally, but on the exterior, remain natural and don't go out of your way to make a big deal out of training in these Lojong slogans. Always practice the 3 general principles. I won't go into them at this time. I'm just reviewing these. So these are the commitments of mind training. Don't think about the affairs of others. A commitment to just don't be too concerned when your thoughts about other people. Work on the stronger disturbing emotions first. Ones that are most obvious, that cause the most problems. That's the commitment here. Another commitment is to give up all hope for results. Don't fantasize about what's going to happen when you reach the end of the path in the Lojong practice. The next is give up poisonous foods. And this means to don't hold grudges. That's a commitment to let go of grudges. Don't rely on your good nature. Is a commitment to don't be too accepting of your shortcomings. Don't gloss over them. The next one is don't react on impulse to critical remarks. This is a commitment to self-control. Don't wait in ambush. This is a commitment to let go of anger and to not wait for the weakness of others to attack them. The next commitment is don't make insincere comments. In other words, don't humiliate other people. Don't shift a Zo's burden to an ox, which means take responsibility for yourself and don't push your work on other people. Don't aim to be the fastest. Don't compete with others. That is the commitment. Another is don't put an exchange value on things. Do good deeds without scheming about benefiting yourself by doing the good deeds. And then the last one is don't turn gods into demons. So don't use these slogans or your spirituality to increase your self-absorption, your arrogance. So that finishes the commitments of mind training. So now we're starting the last point, the 7 points of mind training. And point 7 is guidelines for mind training. These slogans of the 7th point, they depict the overall Lojong spirit that is required for us to progress along the path with our practice. These slogans are about approaching mind training in everyday life. They are meant as a triggering mechanism. We memorize these slogans, and then as we go through our daily life, we will recall them. They will come to our attention in certain circumstances, and they will bring us back to what we're doing and what we need to be doing, what need to be focusing on. Each slogan is a mindfulness practice. It's good to memorize them, and they will automatically come to mind when appropriate situations arise. They will help us become more aware of what we are doing. And again, this helps bring the Lojong spirit into everything that we do. And he keeps on mentioning with each of these slogans the Lojong spirit. So that's an important point to remember, is the Lojong spirit. So the next slogan is number 39. All spiritual practices should be done with one intention. What this is getting at is when we begin Lojong, we are obsessed with egotistic concerns. We need to examine our mind, look and see what we need to develop, what we need to focus our attention on. That the spiritual practice is about bodhicitta, developing a warm heart, compassion for others, as well as the idea of absolute bodhicitta, which is emptiness. So the object is bodhicitta. If we approach mind training with a heavy-handed approach, aggressive, uptight, it really is counterproductive. Instead of trying, you might say, make war and conquer our negative tendencies by force, we have to do it with kindness. We have to bring kindness, sensitivity, and gentleness into our thoughts, into our speech, into our actions. And if we do that, we will naturally reduce and diminish our self-obsessive tendencies. He has a quote here by Sanjay Gompa. These are all Kadampa masters, by the way. The quote is, "The purpose of all the scriptures and treatises is to attain liberation. And for this, it is necessary to subdue self-grasping. Therefore, all activities of study, reflection, and meditation are for the sake of subduing self-grasping." So this is what is meant by all practices should be done with one intention, to reduce self-grasping. Our activities are to open ourselves up to the world through loving kindness, patience, and understanding. If our bodhicitta attitude is natural, we'll be doing everything with one intention, even if we are doing a variety of different practices. So he finishes this one with a quote by Padampa Sanjay, and it is, "Whatever you want, others all want as much, so act accordingly." The next slogan is number 40. "All corrections are made in one way." Here again, in the Lojong spirit of bodhicitta, in the face of adversity, maintaining this Lojong spirit, no matter what arises, we try to maintain this attitude and motivation of bodhicitta. We're still in samsara, or conditioned existence, and difficult situations and people will arise. It's unavoidable. And we'll still have emotional difficulties. We'll have lapses in our practice, suffer from laziness, perhaps depression, sadness, and so forth. And all of these are just characteristic of samsara. We can't expect to escape all of this like that. Life will be full of uncertainties and things will arise. My definition of a plan is a well thought out fantasy, and our plans will go south or north or east or west or wherever, but they will disappear. And we have no choice but to be able to work with these things. And we can learn to utilize these difficult situations to help generate compassion. And this will help us give even difficulties a positive spin. This is one of the things that I like about the Lojong slogans, is that they allow us to work with our difficulties in a way that cause spiritual growth. And instead of looking at them as a huge problem, well, we don't go out looking for difficulties. When they do arise, they actually can be very valuable in our practice. We can connect with adversity and welcome the pain into our practice and use it to transform our minds. Again, he quotes Sanjay Gompa. "Therefore, when the desire for not encountering undesirable events or the fear of these occurring arise in your heart, take it upon yourself the similar feelings of all sentient beings. When this is understood, the understanding of emptiness too arises naturally. So we can realize that we are not alone, that everybody is having difficulties too. We're not being singled out, and that we can use these things. There are benefits. One is thinking about others lessens our own psychological distress. If we keep thinking about our own problems, they just grow and magnify and get bigger and bigger. But if we think about others, we don't have time, what would I say, ruminate about our own problems, and our own problems get smaller and smaller. When we focus on pain and self-pity, it only generates more negativity. It's that simple. When we reflect on the suffering of others, it will gradually transform our own suffering until we experience the world very differently. Adverse conditions are our spiritual teachers. This is a quote in the book here. Demons and possessors, spirits, the Buddha's emanations. Sickness is a broom for negative karma and defilements. Sufferings are the display of ultimate reality's expanse. So that gives you something to think about. And so at this point, I'm just going to talk about what my day went like yesterday. And that was that I needed a new refrigerator, and I did some shopping around, and I decided that the refrigerator that I wanted, I could get at a very inexpensive price through Home Depot. And I've done a lot of business with Home Depot. So I bought it online, and then they're going to bring it out, which was yesterday, and they brought it out. And I was surprised because delivery meant they carried it into the house and left. There was nothing more than that. It was not in a box. But first of all, they noted that it had a dented door, and they said, well, we'll come back at some future date and replace the door. And then I pointed out it had a dent on the side of it. And then they said, well, we'll have to, at a future date, come back and replace the whole refrigerator. Meanwhile, it was hinged on the wrong side, and I had emptied my refrigerator, and I had given my friend permission to take it. And so he came over, and the two of us figured out eventually how to get the door hinged the right way, and then get it all loaded up with my food that had been sitting out for a long time, because this was a long process. And it took calling this 800 number at Home Depot. I think I called them a couple of times, in fact. They were nice. I was nice too. I didn't lose my temper or yell at them or scream or anything. I was thankful and grateful. I was put on hold a long time. Anyway, they were going to then deliver the new refrigerator Friday, and Friday I have an appointment down in Eau Claire. Good chance that when they come, I'm not going to be here. So I gave all of this some thought, and I called them up today. Same number, talked to another person, and said, look, I don't want to go through it, me having to change the hinge on the refrigerator by myself. I'll take the refrigerator the way it is. What kind of a discount can you give me on it? And they gave me a significant discount, and the case was closed. Again, I was on hold a long time. We're going into some of the next slogans, and that is patience. But the point is that if you can take what comes your way and not get too upset about the whole thing, and realize that it's just the way the world works, it gets workable. So I'm satisfied. I think they're very happy to not have to come here again. And next time you're here, you'll hopefully see a new refrigerator. So that's my story of the way my day goes sometimes. So number 41 is at the beginning and the end, two things to be done. And this means that to practice this bodhicitta meditation at the beginning and the end of every day to help maintain this Lojong practice. So in the morning when you get up, think about bodhicitta. This helps clear up our minds. It helps us begin the day in a bright manner, you might say, in a calm, positive state of mind. It's a great remedy for waking up in a bad mood. Really, this is important with any part of the Lojong slogans. It's important to remind us that we can change, that our minds are very pliable. We can change. Change is very easy if we don't resist. So then in the evening, it's helpful to remind ourselves again of the commitment to avoid slipping into he uses the term survival mode during the day, or by the time you get to the evening, phew, I made it. I think I'm going to finally make it to bed before this day ends. Before you go to sleep, just go over the way the day went and note any infringements in your commitments or in your bodhicitta. Acknowledge them. You don't have to beat yourself up with guilt or anything like that, but make a commitment that you will try to avoid this in the future. So it's just noting where you were successful and notice where you weren't so successful, and then making this commitment to improve. Nobody is perfect, and you're not expecting yourself to be perfect. Keep this joyous and positive attitude. That's what really is important. Here is a quote by Tralig Rinpoche. If we generate the loving kindness of bodhicitta, we will gradually increase our positive outlook on life and fill our lives with richness and purpose. So that is what is being talked about here. Train ourselves so that we can control our moods and our state of mind and turn to a positive or a more positive direction. Guilt is a problem. There's no need to beat ourselves up with guilt and so forth. If you do this in the morning and in the evening, it will lift your moods, it will remove your doubts, lift your spirits. A great way to prepare to meet a new day with a happy and uplifted frame of mind. And I know it's a lot more difficult to do that than to read about it and talk about it. If you keep working at it properly, it will happen. Number 42 is whichever of the two occurs, be patient. So what we meet in life is beyond our control. We're constantly meeting with people that have different karmic patterns than us, and we have interconnections. And if you're like me, you're meeting with animals that have different attitudes than you do. Like right now, there are a lot of insects that are trying to get into my house because the house is warm and it's not warm outside. And then there are the mice and the squirrels and so forth. I don't have complete control of all of this. Then we all have our own ripening, karmic ripening, that life is uncertain. Life goes up and down. Mind training, on the other hand, can help us center our lives, give our lives some balance. He says we need an intelligent form of patience if we're going to avoid being hurt and destabilized by all the uncertainty and the up and downs of life. Otherwise, we can be just swept up by all the changes that happen in our lifetime. So life experience often leave us bruised. He uses battered emotional wrecks. That's a direct quote. Battered emotional wrecks. I have found a lot of people come to Buddhism because of having so much difficulty and stress and pain in their lives. Buddhism understands the truth of suffering. That was the first noble truth of the Buddha. Tralik Rinpoche says that we can almost be bipolar, going up and down. But patience is important, and it's not a form of passivity with no control. Patience allows us to face this uncertainty, constantly changing world that we live in a creative and beneficial way. Using courage and dignity, that's important. This is a long ways from passivity. Creative, he uses that word in a creative and beneficial way. Creative is new ways of seeing things and working with difficulties. When you run into a difficulty, a problem, let's say even a stone wall, if you look at it and examine it, you'll find that there are ways around it. Maybe there are cracks in the wall. Maybe there is a way over it. Mingyur Rinpoche said his father told him, when you come to a stone wall, you throw your backpack over it first, because then you have to get over the wall to get to your backpack. But there are lots of different paths to take if you really look. Whereas if you give up or in fear turn around and walk the other direction, you will never see these creative paths that are possible. So beneficial means that it benefits yourself and it benefits other people, the two benefits. And the courage means a lot of different things. One way that I put it is that you don't lose it and imagine the worst possible outcome. Oh, my world is coming to an end because of this. There's no other possibility. I like Pema Chodron. It wasn't really in relationship to this slogan, but I remember her saying, try something new. Don't be afraid to try something new. I think this comes from the business world, and that is, it's not invented here. It's easy to think that, well, if the idea doesn't come from me, then it's no good. Well, there are a lot of ideas out there, a lot of different ways of doing things. And then finally, the idea of this patience with dignity is treat yourself and others with respect. Don't beat yourself up and don't become disrespectful to other people. I'm just going to make a little editorial comment here. This is a real problem today, that somehow or another the world seems to have been overcome with an epidemic of anger and disrespect. It's really important to respect yourself and to respect others. When you're disrespecting other people, you're really not doing yourself any benefit at all. You're just angry. And how can you be happy when you're angry? So the skillful exercise of patience makes it easier for us to be around other people and easier for other people to be around us. It makes things more predictable, and it will allow you to utilize situations to your advantage. Again, going back to the refrigerator, if I would have just yelled and screamed and so forth at the person on the other end of that 800 phone number, I wouldn't have gotten anywhere. If you're going to accomplish things, we are interdependent with other people, and we have to keep that in mind. Slogan number 43 is observe these two even at the risk of your life. Again, he references the Kadampa masters, and that's where these teachings come from, is the Kadampa school. The Buddha's teachings are summarized in the Dhammapada, which is not used much in Tibetan Buddhism. It's used in some other schools of Buddhism, but the Dhammapada is a summation of the Buddha's teachings and sayings and his life and so forth. So here is the quote from the Dhammapada: by engaging in everything that's wholesome and refraining from everything that's unwholesome, you will tame your mind. That is the essence of my teachings. The two things to observe are engage in everything that's wholesome and refrain from everything that's unwholesome. Quite simple. And the slogan is, even at the risk of your life. Avoid thinking in terms of what's expedient. Rather think about, is the context of your actions, what benefit might they bring? Expediency usually brings negative karma and actions that harm. So always be thinking about the long-term benefits of your action rather than short-term gains. And wholesome means non-harm and beneficial to others. It can be non-harm to yourself or non-harm to others. We should abstain from anything that, in Tralag Rinpoche's words, is unsavory. And then it ends with a quote from Dharma Rakshita: even at the risk of your life, keep the practice of austerities and endure suffering for others' sake. Slogan number 44 is learn the three difficult points. And the three are recognizing conflicting emotions, managing conflicting emotions, eliminating conflicting emotions. And I will say this, that this is quite a slogan. There's a lot in there. These come up frequently in question and answer sessions, like, okay, what do I do? How do I manage my conflicting emotions when they arise? How to recognize them, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot in here, and it certainly is applicable way beyond the Lojong practice. So in terms of recognizing conflicting emotions, the first thing is to realize that most of our suffering is self-inflicted. Our conflicting emotions, our confusion, our delusory states of mind. It's really easy to play the victim and blame others for the problems that we are having. At the very beginning of this book, I think it's on page 6, he talks about the problem of being a victim and how it leaves you powerless. Anyway, when we begin to meditate, or when we are beginners practicing meditation, a common experience is to be surprised at how many thoughts are going through your head. It's the same for emotions, moods, memories, and so forth. We just get swept away by the energy of all of this without really recognizing what's going on. We just, you could say, blown around by the winds of karma, our habitual thought patterns and emotional patterns and so forth. So the first thing we need to do is meditate more and start recognizing this, start getting to know what is happening. Take a look within and start learning to recognize these strong emotions as they arise. I like to say, if you recognize that a strong emotion arose yesterday, that's better than realizing a strong emotion arose a week ago. And if you recognize a strong emotion arose 12 hours ago, is better than recognizing it a day ago. And progress can be short a time it takes before it arises and you recognize it. And eventually you can be aware of it as it arises or as it is beginning to arise even. So little by little, it's not an all or nothing situation, but through meditation and other practices, we start to get to know how our mind works, what brings out desire, anger, jealousy, pride, ignorance, and so forth. I like to use the comparison with writing a CV and saying that we specialize in one of these 5 strong emotions and we have a competency in the other, in another one. Like sometimes the emotion that we spend the most time with is desire, and then sometimes jealousy, we go into jealousy, and then the others arise, but not so much. It's usually desire and then jealousy. Take your pick, but it seems like all of us specialize in one or the other of the 5. The important thing is to get to know yourself, get to know your patterns, get to know which ones are the strongest. And as one of the previous slogans say, work on the strongest one first. At this stage, these conflicting emotions generate so much confusion that it's difficult to even recognize it when it arises. So we start here, and then as we progress, we begin to see more and more how these emotional upheavals arise and recognize what happens. I like to use the analogy of GPS. With GPS, you have to know where you are before you know how to get to where you want to be. Now, with GPS, it does it automatically for you, where it finds where you are. But with Lojong, you've got to figure out where you are. So that is the difference. If we can figure out where we are, how our minds work, then we are well on our way to recognizing these conflicting emotions. The next stage is managing the conflicting emotions. And this means accurately identifying them in the beginning. The managing or the control comes through shamatha meditation and through practicing the 4 immeasurables: immeasurable love, immeasurable compassion, immeasurable joy, and immeasurable equanimity. By practicing this, our mind becomes calm or calmer. And even when we're not meditating, then we have this calm mind that can process these conflicting emotions without getting overwhelmed. So, shamatha meditation and the 4 immeasurables is the answer. This allows us to be less reactive. Traditional Tibetan explanation is the difference between a view from the top of the mountain and the view from the bottom of a narrow valley. The top of the mountain, you get to see you might say, the bigger picture, and you are not as closely involved in what's going on in the bottom of the valley. But in the bottom of the valley, it's very narrow, you see very little, and you are right in the middle of what's going on. So shamatha meditation and practicing the 4 immeasurables will help you gain control of your conflicting emotions. The last one, or number 3, is eliminating conflicting emotions. And this means learning how to transform them. We can't overcome them completely by management. Here is where Vipassana meditation or insight meditation comes in to play. We need to have insight into their nature. Emotions are fleeting. They rise and they fall. They're beyond our reach. And that They really have no inherent existence. We can't pin them down. They're backed up by thoughts, but then thoughts come and go. And we use thoughts to create our version of reality. So the deeper we see into these emotions, the weaker the emotions become, and the effect the emotion have on us will diminish, and eventually they will cease to cause us any real discomfort. You have heard me say this before. I like that picture by Rene Magritte of a smoking pipe, and it says, "This is not a pipe." And I use that. Well, he painted it. His commentary on it was, "This is not a pipe. You cannot fill it with tobacco. It's a picture of a pipe. It's not a pipe." And the Buddhist Lama in me then says, well, the word pipe is on that picture. You cannot fill the word pipe because it's a word. And you cannot fill the thought pipe and smoke it. All of this has no inherent existence. And so all of the thoughts and emotions that we have, they are interrelated, but they have no inherent separate existence. And therefore, when you start understanding that at a deep level, that's where insight comes in, and you realize that it's all empty of inherent reality, and it's all a play of our mind. I guess that's the best way to put it. It's just the play of the mind. And if we don't buy into it, no problem, because we're not influenced by it. It's only when we buy into it that it becomes a problem. So this third, eliminating the conflicting emotions, is just not buying into them, letting them come and letting them go, and realizing that they have no inherent existence.